Greetings. We are fired up to be with you all today. It is cold outside, at least it is here, but we have warm hearts towards the Lord and towards the staff and students spread out across the planet who are really seeking to make a difference for Jesus Christ. And so welcome to the Campus Ministry Today podcast, sponsored by VIA Students, but I'm here with my friend and co-laborer and an amazing man, Paul Wooster. We just got back from a sunny South Florida gathering, a retreat where we convened leaders from most of the larger church-based and campus-based collegiate ministries around the U.S. to pray, to share, to strategize, to have fun, build trust and relationships with each other. It was really a historic gathering, an amazing time. But one of our guests today, was there. And so we're going to be interviewing him. And so Paul, our esteemed guest that was there with us in South Florida, trying to catch the big Marlins, but having a great time with other collegiate ministries. Why don't you introduce him to us today, if you would, bro?
Yes, it's my honor to introduce Pete Hardesty. And he actually caught, did I say your name right, Pete?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Hardesty. And he actually caught the largest fish during the deep sea fishing extravaganza. And yeah,
every now and then it's a nut. Every now and then, guys.
And I also have to introduce our other guests before we move forward. I have a gecko here. It's attached to my hand, and so I'm gonna let him go. I wanted to show you guys that, but so yes, we have Pete. He currently lives in Washington D.C. and he serves as the U.S. director for Young Life College. And he's been with Young Life for 27 years, which is impressive. And
they can't get rid of me, Paul.
Yeah, right. Sometimes we just got to outlast, right?
Right.
And Pete is the co-author of 2 Amazon #1 bestsellers, Adulting 101, Book 1 and 2. And so I think that's a book that any of our collegiate leaders could benefit by giving to students, using with students to help disciple them. And both of these books provide tools to help young people have wild success in the real world, covering a wide range of topics, including finances, professionalism, time management, I need some of that, mental health, and more. So having grown up in Baltimore, Pete graduated from University of Virginia, where he was a pre-med major with the emphasis on pre. He crammed his 3 years of grad school into 17 and finally received his Master's of Divinity in 2014. An interesting thing about Pete is he has a passion for the Middle East, and that's inspired Pete to lead service trips for the last 17 years. And he's mostly been working with Palestinian kids in the West Bank. And Pete is a frequent international speaker, and he's spoken to over 100,000 young people in groups as big as 4,000 and as small as 0. I want to hear about the 0 one in a minute.
It's not a fun story for me, but it's a good one.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that one in a minute here. Also, he put in his bio that he sent us that one of his claim to fame is he got to surf pipeline on Oahu's North Shore, which is dear to my heart, actually walking distance from me right now. He surfed it one time, and it was an eventful experience.
It was a short surfing experience. Not yes. Every morning like you do, Paul.
Okay, yeah. So he's been working with college students for over 20 years and loves helping them achieve their potential. So Pete is married to the love of his life, Gianna. How do you say your wife's name?
Giannina.
And he has a senior in high school named Marcelo, which is his favorite. So I love it, Pete. Before you tell us about how you came to Christ, do you want to tell us about your preaching to 0 people experience?
Well, I don't want to, but I will, Paul. That's I think in my life, there's been times it's not always up and to the right. I'll just say that, right? It's not always a steady just growth. And so I think this was year 4 of doing Young Life College, or year 3 of doing Young Life College at James Madison University, a university in Harrisonburg, Virginia, kind of in the northwestern part of Virginia. And it's not a small school. It's 20,000 students, incredible college. It's so fun, great culture. It's got really bright kids, but they might not care about school as much. So they're really very involved, everything. And we tried this new thing. We tried a new, kind of like a faith forum. We were going to, because we had been invited to this faith forum a couple months before with the Buddhist Student Union and the Hindu Club and a Muslim Student Association. And we each, I didn't speak at that. We had students that were kind of a roundtable discussion, but a ton of students came. It was a very vibrant event. So we said, well, we'll hold our own. Why don't we have our own? And literally 0 students came. And we were having, I still remember, we had a gathering, a Young Life gathering with 250 students that week. And 2 nights later, 0. And I even thought, did we have the wrong date on the flyer or the table or this, but it wasn't. It just wasn't. So our question we ask a lot is, do we scrap it or tweak it? Because college ministry, you guys know, and I'm so glad to be on here with you guys, really honored. I mean, I don't know whether the audience knows, but I mean, Shad and Paul are really college ministry legends, both of them in their own respect they've just been doing phenomenal stuff with college students for a long time. So I've learned so much from you guys already, even just in our short friendship over these last couple of months. But that's the question we would ask a lot is, do we tweak it or scrap it? Because college ministry is like a laboratory, right? And you find some things that work, but we're always trying to figure out, okay, and especially the last 5 years, I think college students changed a lot more than they did in the last 5 or the 5 before that, just who they are. So we're still trying to figure stuff out. That's the short version. I was, but the Lord
I thought I had the claim to fame of the lamest event in the history of college ministry because I had 3 graduate students show up and we had awkward conversation. They bought their own pizza at this event, and we never saw them again. So, I think you might have beat me because at least I had some people show up.
Well, we had a couple student leaders, but as far as students that came, 0.
Okay.
So talk. We're not going to do this anymore. Let's go get some pizza.
In a weird way, it's kind of encouraging, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, could you tell us how you came to Christ, Pete?
Yeah, I grew up in a great family. My mom and dad are 2 of the best people I've ever known, but we didn't go to church a lot growing up. My mom was a believer and would kind of drag us from time to time. So I grew up kind of good kid, I would say, I was involved in sports and school and clubs, did a lot of stuff. And when I got to high school, I was super insecure though. I call myself a second or third runger. If there's popularity, you got those kids that everybody, I was maybe that second. I was a nice kid and played sports, got good grades, was in the band too, which not many people do sports in the band. I have some funny stories about that, but I was super insecure and I wanted people to like me. I would have literally done anything for people to like me. So I get to high school, I'm playing on the soccer team, and this older dude on the soccer team named Steve said, "Hey, you want to go to Young Life?" And I said, "No thanks." I didn't know what it was. I just thought I was too cool for that. And then he said words that would forever change my life.
Oh, yeah.
He said it's at Stephanie Selway's house.
And I just hope Stephanie's not listening to the podcast today. But
I hope she is. We're still Facebook friends, She'll know that I attribute, my life, a huge life change to her. And I said, whoa. She had no idea who I was. She was a junior. I was a freshman. And he said, yeah, it's at her house. I said, we can go inside of her house? And he said, yeah. I said, will she be there? And he said, yeah, her and all her friends. I said, what time are you picking me up? So I went in there. I hadn't really, I was experiencing some of that dissatisfaction because if you don't have Jesus, you have dissatisfaction in your life, but not to like I didn't have anything crazy happen. I had lost a few family members, but I was kind of, our hearts are restless till they find their rest in Jesus. I think Augustine said that, but I was a little bit restless, but just, it was going to be a lot in that next year. So I went to that club meeting for Young Life in Stephanie's house. And I thought it was so awesome. I mean, I remember we sang songs, it was a little weird, but they did these funny skits. And then this dude got up that must have been, I mean, he was ancient to me. He was probably 30 years old. He was the, I mean, he looked and he started giving this talk about Jesus and how it related to real life and high school and opened the Bible. And I had started to kind of go to some parties and just starting to cause a little bit of trouble. And so, uh, that started my kind of, it was that taste and see, come and see that the Lord is good. And over the course of that year, I didn't miss many of those meetings. And then the next year, I was kind of learning more about Jesus, but also kind of getting into some more trouble, maybe a little bit. Uh, Maybe even starting to, I mean, not maybe, I did starting to deal drugs and steal some car stereos, but still have good grades and almost lead this double life. I had my young life, and then I had this other life that, and then after my sophomore year of high school at this camp called Lake Champion, that's when I first, you guys, really heard. I'm sure I had heard it at church some, heard it from a friend, my parents, my mom especially, about what Jesus did on the cross. And I couldn't believe it at first. I could not believe I had never heard or experienced that type of love before. And I remember sitting out on this little dock at this camp up in New York called Lake Champion, just saying, Jesus, if you did that for me, my whole life is yours. And I don't know that that's exactly the gospel even, like, because we're not going to repay him we're not trying to repay Jesus by living our life for him. But I just said, basically, it was that time of surrender of, hey, if you've done that, take my entire life. And I still have some, as we all do, some ups and downs. Again, it's not always up and to the right, but that was one of the stakes in the ground of where I really feel like I gave my life to Christ. And then college was a interesting time for me. When I got to college, I started leaving that double life again, where I was partying and kind of involved in all kinds of stuff that we know that a lot of college students do that are destructive to themselves. And then I actually went through Young Life Leader training and got placed as a leader. And it wasn't until I'm sitting with some middle school guys sharing about Jesus that I've literally felt the dissonance and the like hair stand up on my neck of, you're saying this, but you're doing something else. And that was another stake in the ground where I said, all right, Jesus, I'm going all in for you. I know that stuff, even though it's tempting for me, I know it's not where true life is found. So again, it's not always up and to the right, but that was my second time where I've never gone back to that kind of double life thing. I still struggle, as we all do, but that was towards the end of my freshman year of college. That was another kind of very poignant moment for me.
Yeah, I mean, if we're all honest, we all have those ups and downs, and that's part. Thanks you for sharing that, Pete. And before we move on to more of your story, can you share a little bit more about your book, the books you wrote, and kind of why you guys put those together?
Well, I moved in 2004 to start working at James Madison University, who I think is just the students are just these incredible. It's one of my funnest seasons. I was there for about 14 years. And I realized pretty quickly that these were really bright students. James Madison is pretty hard to get into around here in Virginia, but they were not ready for real life. They had some gaps, right? Like one of the first gaps I realized was I was teaching my guys' small group how to write handwritten thank you notes, which I think is one of the most important things we can do. They're like gold, especially in the fast-paced society now. And this dude that was really smart, got good grades, and went on to he's a dentist. He's literally an army dentist now, went to Tufts Dental. He came up to me afterwards and was like, hey, where's the return address and where's like to address? Where's the to and from? I thought he was kidding. And I was like, what? You're 20 years old. You don't know that, And another time a guy came up, didn't know how to fill out a check. Not that we use checks now, but 20 years ago, people use checks. So we realized that school, as great as school is, and I'm a big fan of teachers, didn't prepare students for real life. And so that's where one of my old guys I discipled a couple years after college, he runs a Chick-fil-A now. He came back to me and I would run this little senior life prep class. just senior life wisdom. And I gave at the end, we'd go grocery shopping. It was like 4 weeks long, a couple hours a week. And we'd get 20 or 25 seniors together. And then it grew to maybe 30, 40, 50. And we'd go grocery shop and we'd talk about finances, professionalism, anything I could help. I tried to talk about my mistakes in my 20s. And then at the end, I'd give them a little packet of 20 pages. Most of it was just wisdom from my mentors. And he came to me 2 or 3 years after graduating and said, Pete, I've never used another textbook. I sold them all the day I graduated, but I've come back to this packet of, this 20-page packet a bunch. Have you ever thought about writing a book or publishing it? And I was like, his name's Josh. I was like, Josh, honestly, no, like I'm not a very good writer and I haven't thought about that. He said, I think we should. Do you want to pray about it? I said, now you say it, I don't need to pray about it. I think yes. The feedback we got was that was so helpful to these seniors in their 20 something. So the first book we wrote was book 1. It was Adulting 101. And it was all about how to interview, 3 chapters on finances, professionalism, time management, really how to live life in your 20s and really maybe even while you're in college. It was hard skills. Then 3 or 4 years later, we wrote the second book. And I think the second book is actually, I think it's really good because a lot of the material came from these 5 therapists, these counselors, licensed mental health professionals that we joined forces with. They had over 100 years of clinical experience with young people. And so we have that one's more like maybe adulting on the inside. So it's about self-awareness, emotional intelligence, 2 chapters on social media. And then the last half of the book is about mental health. So 2 chapters on anxiety, 2 on loneliness, 2 on depression. And it's really almost a bridge like for lay people like me. I mean, me and Josh we are not mental health professionals or anything, but it's kind of like what are some really tried and true strategies for overcoming that stuff? So we've been really fortunate. It's been really fun to see how the book has helped folks. If anyone wants copies, a lot of college people take their leaders through it, or even do a senior prep course. I can get really good deals. So just email me. I get a really good deal. Get it from me, not on Amazon. We can have a box or 2 or 4 show up on your doorstep, and we'll work it out. And we've really been said money is not going to stop anybody. So if you even can't afford one, even if there's a college student listening, is like, I don't have $15. Email me or connect with me on social media. We'll get a book into your hands. So
that's great. Sounds like I need to read that book. Gosh, you were hitting on a number of hot buttons in my life. Gosh, adulting, 1801. I'm a little more advanced than some of the others, I think. So, thank you, bro. I need to get a copy of that book. Really, it looks like it's a fantastic one. Thanks for filling us in on that, bro. And we want to,
Chad, just so people know, the book doesn't mention Jesus or God until the last chapter of each book, and that's intentional. And it's God's truth, but it's really for anyone. And then you can just say, hey, you don't have to worry about the last chapter if that's not where you're coming from. But we wanted to let people know that's where we're coming from, and that we really think they're not going to figure out who they were meant to be apart from this relationship with God and through Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's like an evangelistic. It ends up being like a evangelistic tool as well. So
yeah, we take some heat on Amazon because we don't want to surprise people, but I have a folder of all our negative reviews. Some of them we laugh at. Some of them are like, yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ignore all those negative reviews. I only like to read the positive ones. No. Well, that's great to hear about that. Those tools, those are great. We want to hear a little bit more about Young Life. Some of our listeners, some of those watching, may not know as much about Young Life, and it could be that they their view is different, more of high school or junior high ministry, and so we're going to learn a lot about the college aspect of Young Life. So those who are tuning in today, give us a little overview of Young Life, if you would, Pete. Make sure you mention that you guys do work with college students also, but just a brief overview of the ministry of Young Life across the country.
Sure, yeah. Well, Young Life started in 1941. A year before that, a youth pastor in Texas, Gainesville, Texas, actually, near Dallas, his senior pastor said, hey, his name was Jim. Well, the senior pastor's name was Clyde Kennedy. Clyde said, Jim Rayburn, the youth pastor, I'll take care of every kid that comes into the church, walks in. And they were about a mile from a high school. He said, I want you to go get every other kid. So it really began this dual vision of a senior pastor and a youth pastor saying, we want the kids that would never come to church, that are disinterested. Uh, we want them to hear about Jesus. And so Jim Rayburn, that was our founder, kind of started working that. And then, one of his famous quotes is, if you want kids to come to Sunday school, don't have it on Sunday and don't call it school. So that's where it began. It began as the heart of God, that Jesus did not come for the healthy. He came for the sick. He didn't come for the righteous, but to call sinners to repentance. And so that's really where Young Life began. And it's grown now to, and it was mostly based on reaching high school students for probably the first 60 to 70 years. And then maybe about 20 or 30 years ago, we realized that there was some middle school students that were involved, and that's called Wildlife. And then about maybe 15 or 17 years ago, we realized that our mission statement is to introduce adolescents to Jesus Christ and to help them grow in their faith. And so you guys know, adolescents started expanding and going older. I even saw one study that put it up to age 27. I don't know about that. That's getting a little ridiculous, but definitely into college. And so we were faced in Young Life, do we change our mission statement we've had for 60, 70 years, or do we open up the back end of our ministry to really be outreach to college as well? Now, some of our history, we've had college students that are mentors or Young Life leaders, to high school, middle school. That's been for our whole history. But do we actually want to do outreach and do ministry with and to and for college students? So after a couple years of listening and praying, we decided to go for it and hired someone that I know, Shad, Mike Gaffney, who ran one of the larger college ministries at a church up in Seattle for a long time, I think 20 years, to kind of lead the charge in Young Life. And so that began at about 2010, 2011 was kind of our official. So we've only really been doing official college ministry, Young Life College, for whatever that is, 12 years. Now we're in 112 countries, the organization, 112 countries. We have about, I think it's around 5,000 staff in those full-time staff, a bunch of other part-time, and then also a lot of volunteers. So on the college side, it's much more the same than different, but you guys know 18 to 23-year-olds are different than 14 to 18-year-olds. So we really want to kind of gear our ministry, of course, towards the audience. And we've landed on community, adventure, and significance are kind of our three pillars. Community, adventure, and significance. That we'll start in the community. We want to invite college students into a community where they can belong even before they believe. We go to where they are. That's also one of the core principles of Young Life. We meet kids where they're at. And one of our secret sauces is called contact work. And you guys do it so well. It's just relational ministry. It's just building friendships where we earn the right to share with them about Jesus. So, and then the adventure part is kind of our camps, our contact work. We like to do things with kids, maybe off campus, doing things that they would enjoy doing, road trips, hikes, whatever, and really whatever they're into. And they might not want to go hiking. It might be joining them in video games or whatever they're into. We try to meet them where they are. And then significance, as they start to learn who Jesus is, and as they start to want to know and follow him, we want to deploy them in the service in the world. And that's the significance piece, where we find our significance in Jesus, but we also find it as we give our lives away. So that's kind of the college piece of Young Life.
That's incredible. And I didn't even know that the college piece was so new. This is like a new aspect of a ministry that's been around for a while. And that's really exciting that God has raised up about 90 staff that focus on the college, collegiate side of things, and you as their leader. So that's such an opportunity. And I love that we've been able to get to know you, and even just getting to hang out with you and hear your heart and your vision for the ministry there. I think it's exciting times ahead. And I love Young Life. I love seeing how much fun that they have, that y'all have. And, I've always been a little jealous. It seems like all your leaders are so much more cool and fun and just, you know what I mean? I don't know what it is, but I think it does kind of, it's a great way to attract, and what you're saying, that the non-Christian student. And I think that's such a need. Is the average college campus across North America is about 5% reached with the gospel. And that's being generous on some campuses.
Yeah.
So my question is,
the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few.
Right.
And so
yes.
Thank you for saying that. We're still learning. And I got to say, I mean, I don't say we don't know what we're doing, but in some way we don't know what we're doing. Try to follow Jesus and show up on campus, show up in kids' lives. And you guys, the Via Network, this podcast, I was consuming this before I even knew, really what we were doing. And so really grateful to you and Shad and this network and this community for equipping college ministers all over the country, including Young Life staff and leaders.
Well, that's so encouraging. And I do think keep some of that freshness as a movement, Young Life, like take the energy, take those fresh ideas, because we need something new to reach people. Sometimes you have to do something that no one else is doing to reach people that no one else is reaching. And so maybe that's how God wants to use Young Life as we move forward. But let's get back to your story here, Pete. What drew you to come on staff with Young Life? And as we're on the topic as well, what are some of the strengths of the Young Life organization in your opinion?
When I think of what drew me, you mentioned a little bit, the fun, the freedom, you don't have to give up living life to the full to follow Jesus. That's one of the misconceptions that's so funny, because it is where a full life is found. But a lot of people think, and I do wonder, I think sometimes that we've brought that on ourselves, that reputation, because you look at some people that claim to follow Jesus and it's like, that life doesn't look that fun. Honestly, I don't want to do that. Hey, please tell your face you're having some fun. Smile once in a while, what's going on here? And so I do think as we walk with students and help them figure out what does it actually mean to follow Jesus, he'll never ask us to give up something that he's not going to replace with something better. So a lot of kids are holding on to something, whether it be partying or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a relationship or whatever they're filling the hole in their heart with, and thinking, gosh, I can't do that. God created the reality of life, right? And of course he's going to create life to be better with him than without him because of who he is. That's what we're looking for. So I think that's what I saw in Young Life, through Young Life, is another thing that drew me was I knew it worked, Paul and Shad. I saw some of my friends come to Christ. I came to Christ, and I just saw a little bit of the kingdom. That's been some of the times I've gotten to go to the Middle East or travel. I would say everybody should have to go on an international trip every year, because you just get to see that God's kingdom is so much bigger than me. God's kingdom is so much bigger than Young Life. God's kingdom is so much bigger than Via. Even though these things are good and God's moving and all, it's awesome, but we're just a little speck. He's doing so much in the world. And so it's like, we got to figure out that, but I knew it worked. I knew this is one of the many, many things that God uses to sweep people into his kingdom. And then the other thing is, I also didn't get into med school. That's not why. I went to MCAT.
Oops.
At every interview, they were like, so the MCATs, what happened? I was like, honestly, I didn't really study because I was still doing ministry. I was doing Young Life. I knew I was going to go on Young Life staff. That's not why. But so the strengths of Young Life, I think, well, we have a lot of growth edges. That'd probably be easier to talk about. But a couple of our strengths, I think, are understanding our audience because we're with them. That's really that's our like, if you want our secret sauce, it's like contact work. We're going to show up and show up and show up and show up. And if Jesus lives inside of us, he's showing up, right? He's showing up too. A lot of times you can not wear people down, but you just keep loving them, and we earn the right. Um, we earn the right to be heard. Now that has a shadow side, of course, right? We can build these beautiful bridges of friendship for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and then never cross them. And it's like that breaks my heart too. And it's like, hey, the Romans 10, how can they hear of the one, how can they believe in the one they haven't heard of? So that's one of our growth edges, young life. We need to cross the bridge a little sooner. And so, I think also Jesus is the central piece. We can partner with all kinds of churches, from the Catholic Church we have great partnerships to super charismatic churches that we have partnerships with. And so I think that's a strength, that we're pretty ecumenical and international. And everyone feels welcome. It's a place for kids that don't want much to do with Jesus. And I think a lot of them find a home around Young Life and Young Life leaders. I did. So I think that's I think that's a couple of the strengths. Growth edges, I could list a bunch of more too, but
that'd be fascinating to hear. You got a question for him, Shad?
Yeah, you played different roles. I know you were at James Madison for a bunch of years, and now recently you've taken on this national director role for the college ministries, trying to grow the college ministry focus for Young Life. And when we think of Young Life, we always think of cool staff, of which I'm sure the national director is kind of the coolest of cool, for sure.
Yeah, and, I can dispel that.
And it's a humble cool. It's a humble cool. The coolest ones are, they don't think they're cool, but they are cool. And but it's leaders, like you say, Pete, who are trying to relate to and reach the kids in high school, junior high, that maybe nobody else is willing or able to reach. And I just respect that so much. And you gotta. There can be a lot of, in friendship evangelism, there can be a whole lot of friendship and not much evangelism, right? Mm-hmm. And that's something that all of us need to work on. I bet you there's 20 or 30 guys, Paul, on our campus alone right now, that if I said, let's go get a cup of coffee, let's go get a meal together, and let me share they would let me share the gospel with them right now. I have that kind of rapport and relationship. So why don't I do that? Am I too busy? Am I too lazy? Do I not care about them enough? And so it's one thing to build a relationship. It's another thing to share the gospel. It's even another thing to ask them the golden question, right?
Yeah.
Would you like to receive Christ into your life as your Savior and your Lord right now? What do you think, bro? Yeah. And so that's one of the most difficult questions to ask in any language. And yet there's no more important question to ask in the human language anywhere, and of course is zip the lip and let them answer, right? But as it relates to Young Life, Pete, the DNA of Young Life in the college ministries, I see how it's worked in the junior high, high school. How does a staff person go about on a college campus identifying those groups that maybe nobody else is focused on? What are those groups? And how do you, as a staff person, because this podcast is mainly for staff people that watch and listen to this thing, you guys are going after apparently the unreached on college campuses, but how does that work? How does a staff person begin doing that and proceed and see some fruit?
Well, I wish I had a silver bullet answer. I know we talked about them last week. I will say about one of my friends said, cool just means not dictated by your circumstances. Doesn't mean you're wearing Lululemon or you have a certain cool pair of glasses or something. And I actually think faithful is cool. So Shad, I just think back through about the leaders that I've had, the best ones, excuse me, were not the coolest. The best ones were the most faithful. And God works through faithfulness. And you know what? That doesn't take any skill. It doesn't take any talent. In fact, I feel like I'm kind of I was a blue collar athlete. Like probably had the least skill of or talent, gifting of anybody in there. I feel like I've been a blue collar minister, honestly. Like I had I was so anxious and so worried. The first time I did a funny skit with Young Life was in front of this big weekend camp, actually at the same place I met Christ. I couldn't go out on stage. Left my guy that I was doing it with to go out by himself. I was dressed up. I'm in the back. I was so anxious. I had a nervous. I actually had a little facial tick for a couple years. So anxious, but God you just keep showing up, keep taking steps ahead. One of my best leaders, one of my best volunteer leaders I ever had in doing ministry with young kids young people was a Navy pilot named Joe Slaughter. Terrible up front. You don't want him to do the funny stuff. You don't even want him to give a talk. But he showed up in guys' lives, and kids came to Christ. They showed up, and he's still in touch with them all. He taught at the Naval Academy. I mean, he was and so I think as we think about what do staff do, Young Life's college staff, when they show up on a campus, the first thing they're going to do is to begin a prayer effort. That's our recipe. And it's like, you shouldn't even walk on campus without praying first. And then who can you rally around you to start to get a prayer? And that might be a personal prayer team. It might be some people involved in campus. It might be, maybe you know a couple students, but if you're walking on campus, you don't know anyone. So before we started anything at James Madison, we did a full semester of prayer walks. These awkward, and I did know some students because I had been area director there before. So I had about 5 or 6 students that said, hey, our little band of brothers and sisters, we would do these prayer walks from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Class started at 8 a.m. So about 7:40, there were starting to be students, and you like be walking around and praying and trying not to be weird. And so, right? I mean, you know, but then before we had any event, no event. And then the second thing would just be to start to get to know students. And the crazy part, we don't have we have little tips and tricks and all that, but none of them are as great as showing up where students are. So for me, I would go to the rec center. I played basketball in high school, but I wasn't very good. But I could still kind of play good enough that I could still hang. Actually, one of the most embarrassing moments was I started doing a Bible study with the varsity soccer team, these guys. And on the off season, when they would play basketball too, and a lot of them were really good. They were just great athletes. I could still hang. I played basketball, but I still probably wasn't as good as some of them. And one time we play on Saturday mornings, and there was 15 dudes, and I would be good enough sometimes to stay on and win some. But this guy was so fast. He ran by me, and I was running backwards, but he ran by me so fast. I tried to turn and run and stay with him, and my heels clicked, and I went flying backwards and slid on the court right in front of the 10 dudes waiting to play next, all the varsity athletes, all. And they were all and I'm, I have gray hair. I don't know whether people are listening to this or watching it, but it was like that moment when I knew that I wasn't a young person anymore. So prayer, getting to know students, and then rallying your student leadership team. Because I think, a student ministry is only as good as the student leaders that they have leading it. Because the secret sauce that we also, again, this is the secret sauce for probably almost any student ministry, is we're student run. We're not staff heavy, which we actually need to grow. We need to learn from some of the really, really great college campus ministries that have these rich histories, because we are on 200 campuses, but we only have 90 staff. And I remember last week, something that stuck out to me was all the rest of the college ministries have way more staff than the campuses they're on. And I think that's a good recipe, because you want to have teams. But even though they might have 4 or 5 or 10 staff at somewhere, they also have 20, 30, 40 student leaders, and students are running the ministry, and the staff are equipping the students to do the actual ministry. So I think that's another secret sauce of what we do. We have club, which would be kind of our large group outreach meeting. That varies a lot with what campus to campus. That might be a trivia night. It might be a spotlight on a student group, like the salsa club that comes and gives a presentation or teaches you how to do salsa, and then you stand up at the end and give a message or a testimony. We have small groups. That's a huge part of our discipleship strategy. I would say small groups, and most of them are student-led small groups. We don't have as many co-ed discipleship forums, like larger groups. Maybe some campuses do that. Maybe once a month they'll get all the small groups together, but we don't have that. We don't employ that tool as much. Um, but each group, each student leader does kind of figure out what's their niche, where are they going to go, and that might be somewhere they're already in on campus. But then we also want them to go as a missionary on campus. That's what you guys do so well, is talk about how can we help students think about their campuses as missionaries, that they are called to go, and maybe called to go to another people group, another affinity group, another social group, a different group. So we've had students pledge fraternities on purpose to reach their fraternity for Christ, to pledge sororities to reach their sorority for Christ, to join a club sport, or even a student org that they're not even that super excited about, but just so they can join in and meet people where they're at. So I went too long on that. Sorry.
That's great. And that started kind of to answer the second question, the next question about evangelism. You know, if you've listened to the podcast for any length of time, you know, we're all about the EDM. So we're going to ask the E question on evangelism here. And you hit on several things that I think are automatically gold right there. Is I think your club meetings, having some sort of a place that students can invite their friends, that's a fun, welcoming, low bar of entry kind of environment, is a really helpful thing in evangelism. I think sometimes some ministries are so serious spiritually, they're so hardcore that they think, oh, we don't want to have any of these fun and games and pizza and ping pong or whatever it is. And they're like, we're just going to do the Bible. And, you know, that works for attracting Christians. But if you're trying to create an environment where non-Christians come around, having some environments that are more like your club meeting and that sort of idea. So I think that's really valuable. And you also touched on this affinity group concept of these students are rushing fraternities just so they could reach out to the lost. That's incredible. Any other kind of tips or things you guys have seen be fruitful in the area of evangelism and reaching non-Christians?
Yeah, this is something I think is, and now I know the Bible doesn't make a distinction between evangelism and disciple making, which I love that you guys have distinguished disciple making from discipleship, because you can have a bunch of small groups going and have a lot of discipleship happening, but maybe not as much disciple making happening. So I know that we don't want to separate even those two things. So, but it feels to us, like evangelism's harder, than discipleship, even though they're both hard and then the missions mobilization, that's hard too. But I think in evangelism, we have 3 or 4 different, or maybe even 5 or 6 different ways that it's happening. And one of the ways is that larger group meeting, a gathering called club, or different campuses actually call it different things now. Some would just call it Young Life. And like you said, Paul, we want to create an environment where every single student will be welcome and feel like, oh, I can belong. And the way we talk about Jesus is, I think, the way he spoke about himself and the way he lived. It's wild that he had friendships and the really lost people felt very at home with him. It was the religious people that really he butted heads with and stuff, and really that he had trouble. It was like the people that were doing the worst stuff felt very loved and accepted by him. So that's what we try to create, those environments. We also have seen small groups as a way to invite people into a community of people that are going to look at life and do life together and see what, as long as it's a safe place where they can kind of maybe ask questions or dip their toe in another way. We also do these, we have a bunch of camps and properties around the country. And so we utilize those. We had 17 kind of fall weekend retreats. We don't call them retreats because we call them, just fall weekends. So you can kind of come and again, it's lots of high adventure, lots of craziness, and then several messages about how Jesus would be applicable and relevant to life in college, and really where we share the gospel. But in terms that we always try to look through that lens, right? Is what lens are you looking through? And I think it's also helpful you need to have relationships with lost students if you're going to try to create an environment for lost students. That's where we can just ask our students, our student leaders, and they know. And then we might even ask, when you get to know lost students well enough, you can ask them, what are they into? How do you experience that? What do you think? And even have them start to create some of the environments and meetings. They can speak into them if you let them. So some schools, not all of them, have like a little steering committee, and they'll have lost students on the steering committee. Because like if you're doing evangelism, it kind of helps to know what lost students are into. How about if they tell you what they're into? Not if you're just guessing and trying, like my event that had 0 people come to. I obviously was getting a little bit out of touch. We'll also utilize spring break for outreach trips. A lot of campuses, I think we had about 80 of our campuses take a spring break trip somewhere. A lot of times we go to the beach, or um, San Diego has a couple surf camps at a YMCA camp that we'll run 3 weeks in a row. But again, it all comes down to the relationship. And that's where we can get better for sure, is sharing Jesus 101 at the student union, over a Coke, at Starbucks, where we should be the best, not Young Life. But college ministers should be ninjas at this. We should have 4 or 5 tools that we can handle very well, that we're very comfortable, and we should be able to listen. So even when we get that sweat on our upper lip or the stomach, like Shad was talking about, the 20 or 30 guys he knows at Arkansas that today he has earned the right with them. He's not nervous about it because he is a ninja. He's like a, crouching tiger, hidden dragon of evangelism, where he can use the tools and lead people to Jesus, right? Like, whereas most of the time, and God blesses everything. If you take the plunge and do it, but we should be as prepared as we can. So,
Yeah, but I think you guys have the basic raw materials in your DNA as an organization to really understand and grasp and the concept of a movement. And a couple of key ingredients that you all possess is you understand affinity groups. Like you're going after this what was it, the basketball team or the soccer club, or you understand the relationships they have with each other. You understand existing relational networks, and you're going to operate within those existing relational networks. That's how you got invited to that first Young Life meeting. It was a friend invited you, and when you found out there was this relational network that you could kind of get into, boom, you said, I'm there. And you weren't going because it was going to be a great message or they're going to serve great cookies or something. No, it was the relational network that you wanted to be part of, like that. So you guys have majored on that forever. And the second part, and this is what Paul and I are trying to help ministries think through to transition from a ministry to a movement, is you're going after non-Christians. You see a lot of ministries, they step onto a campus, they start their college ministry by seeing how many Christians they can gather together. You're never going to have any kind of an evangelistic DNA or any kind of multiplication of real fruitfulness if you're just trying to reorganize Christians. So I think Young Life has 2 of the greatest essential DNA pieces there. Now let me ask you this, brother: when you do lead someone to Christ, when a staff person or a student leader on campus, a fellow student comes to Christ, what then? What's the follow-up process that you then take that brand new convert, because that's what you're going after. You're going after non-Christians within affinity groups doing a relational evangelism, but boom, they make the decision like you did. What happens then? Where do you take them from there?
yeah, Shad, this has been a growth edge for us and still is, as far as reproducible formulas. And we don't want to break it down to formulas because we're talking about people, but really formulas for the next step. What's the progression? So we've done a lot of work on this as far as a portrait of a disciple. We have a tool where we said, all right, let's imagine that somebody comes to faith their freshman year. What do we want to imagine when they graduate 3.5 years later? What do we want them to look like? What do we want them to be like? What do we want them to have mastery of, or even even a competency in? So we took a lot of work and put that together. Then we work backwards. It's almost like that, begin with the end result in mind. How do we help them to implement? but we don't have one specific tool that we use. And we actually beg and borrow from some of the other campus ministries with which, we InterVarsity and Crew and Navigators. A bunch of them have such great tools that we have used some from all of those three, and they've been so gracious and kind to us and I've learned a ton from just the friendships that I had from being in Harrisonburg. I knew I'd never met I'd never met our nav staff there, but the 3 or 4 biggest campus ministries, I learned a ton because I was friends with their their point person, their staff person. So that's what I would encourage too, as far as not even networking, but go, if you're starting a new college ministry, go with a serving towel over your arm, honoring the people like Shad. How long have you been in Arkansas? How long have you been at University of Arkansas?
Well, let's see. The Civil War was over in '65. I came here in 1973, and have kind of been here ever since. So I confess to you that date.
No, I mean, imagine. I mean, who knows, Shad? Your house. I'm going to visit your house in heaven. It's going to be really big, and I can't wait to see it. Like the number of lives that's been. So if somebody wants to start a new campus ministry, they don't want to just kick open the door and try to, hey, we're here at Arkansas. I think you go and honor the men and women that have been paying the price there for 5, 10, 110 years. Like you have been in Arkansas. I mean, so that's what we did. And I'll tell you, those staff people were very gracious. And so if you're looking for follow-up stuff, looking for those type of things, I think we share resources. We need to do a little better job. That's why I love VIA. It's kind of saying, hey, let's share some resources here. Let's help resource everyone. But the first thing we would do, Shad, is a small group. If someone comes to Christ, it's like, hey, let's get you into a small group. And so we've kind of seen these natural on-ramps of the year, the college year. Like after the first 3 weeks, that's crazy. That's like the Super Bowl, right? For most college ministers, it's weird. It's opposite timing. You meet so many new people, maybe even as some come to faith or from some of your intro events. There's on-ramps into small groups there. And then after this is for just Young Life, we usually have fall retreats sometime like end of September through the beginning of November. We'll have a go away for a weekend. We see another on-ramp after that to discipleship. Some folks come to Christ. And then at the beginning of second semester. And then after spring break. There's students coming to Jesus throughout the whole school year at their time, but there are natural on-ramps. And so we say, okay, what do we want? How do we want to help them take the next step in knowing and following Jesus? That would be a small group, and then possibly being discipled one-on-one. And so maybe I can tell a quick story if we have time. Like guys, I told you about the varsity soccer team that I got to lead a small group I was involved with for a while. But the way that happened was I had gotten to be buddies with this guy who was on the club soccer team. And when he tried out for the varsity team, he blew his knee out during trials. He was good. He would probably made it, maybe not have played. So I got to know him really well, and he was going to share his testimony at our club meeting. Like 10 dudes off the varsity team, because he started managing the team, they all came. So this little guy comes up named Adam afterwards, like, hey man, you lead Bible studies? And I was like, I do. He's like, can I get up into one? And he was a junior. I didn't notice. And I was like, yeah, but the 2 or 3 I lead, I don't know that they're a great fit for you, but I'll meet with you. You want to look at the Bible? Let's look at it. And I said, if you want to invite some of your friends, or we can even just do it one-on-one, just to try to test it out. We could test the waters. He said, how many people you need there? I said, no, I don't. I mean, there's no minimum. But I said, if you want to invite, he was on the soccer team. I said, if you want to invite some of your teammates, great. First night, we meet. A couple weeks later, 7 dudes. All over the map, you guys. One of my favorite small groups I've ever led. I led that for 3 or 4 years. But he was a junior. He was actually the captain of the soccer team. Didn't know that. But the second week, we're just going to read Mark together. So again, we can get better with formulas, because I think to have a reproducible thing you can do with folks is actually really valuable. Yeah. But we lead small groups. A lot of times there's kids all over the map in every small group. So we were just reading Mark. And so we're reading something. And one of these guys named Coco he goes, and you might have to edit this out. I'm not sure if this will be okay, but he goes, hey Pete, I got a question, man. We're trying to follow Jesus here, right? He goes, I know that when I go to parties, there are very hot girls that want to have sex with me. I don't know how not to. what do you say about that? And guys, I go, well, that wasn't my experience in college. Yeah, I don't know. I can, I can't quite relate in that way with you, but let's talk about it. And because that's reality, right? And they're probably way worse stuff than that. But at least he felt in the first couple of weeks, he felt safe enough to say, "Hey, this is something I'm kind of wrestling with. I know that's not who I want to be and what I want to do, but I'm having these girls that are throwing themselves at me." So how would Jesus speak into that? He was kind of a brand new believer too. So, but then they said, these guys are asking us all these questions on the team because we told some of the guys we're doing this little Bible study, small group, whatever we call it with you. They're asking us questions we don't know about the faith. Can we bring them, or can you tell us? And I said, guys, let's talk about these. I want you to walk through the questions with your teammates. Then it started, and this is one thing that helped me. Paul, I had led a lot of small groups. I was 20 years into ministry when I said, why wouldn't I implement a service aspect to every small group I lead automatically, just to make sure and ensure we don't become insular and just look into the inside. So then we said every fourth week, we're going to do something outward facing. We're going to do something where we invite people, or we're going to go do something together and actually serve with our hands. So one of the times, a couple months later, one of these things was, hey, we want to invite everybody over to your house and we'll smoke cigars. That's not bad. Anyone that's 21 might be able to have a little sip of something. I don't know if you can recommend that. But 17 dudes off the 20 of the 25 come over. And all we're going to have is just a question and answer. We'll try to walk through the questions with them. First question, this is the first question. I'll leave you guys with this. It's too long a story. Of this guy from England named Dale, another captain of the team, says, so you're telling me, and we hadn't told him anything. I hadn't said, but Christianity's telling him, you're telling me, this was a couple years ago, the Sandy Hook shooting had been the year before. That dude who shot up all those kids at Sandy Hook, he's in jail right now. He's going to be in jail for the rest of his life. He can, the day before he dies, ask God to forgive him, and God will forgive him. And me, I try to be a pretty good dude, but I'm going to go to hell, and that dude's going to go to heaven. That's what you're telling me?
Well,
all 17. Yeah, exactly. All 17 heads and eyes turn to me, and I'm like, do we want to start with a different question? Maybe warm up to that. But I got to share about Jesus, and that, we're looking at it maybe from the wrong way, whatever. But that was part of their discipleship track, of seeing that, being in those forums and those. So I think we got to get people reading the Bible and giving their lives away. That when they come to faith, we got to get them kind of working on some of the disciplines to grow closer to Jesus. And then we got to get them serving right away. Not necessarily in leadership, but Jesus turned people around to serve right away after they followed him. They didn't have to study for 3 years and then start to do it. So
I love that. And you guys are in the trenches. You're in the trenches with them. So you're in that. They're seeing how you react to that question. These guys you're helping disciple. And, Shad and I call it DICE, discipleship in the context of evangelism. So you're showing them how. And that's how Jesus did ministry. It wasn't like, hey, let's go to the wilderness. Let's go to the desert and study the book of Isaiah and talk about our struggles. They did some of that, but mainly they went from village to village proclaiming the kingdom of God and doing ministry. And he was doing that with them. He was showing them how. And so that's really cool. Even in that story of yours, I can see that life on life, doing ministry together aspect of discipleship. I'm curious about your profile that you guys put together as a team. You're reverse engineering what you're hoping to see. Can you just give us, this is kind of the disciple making aspect. Can you give us just a couple of those? What are some of those things you hope to see a student leader, if they're kind of going through your process, by the time they graduate, what do you hope to see in those students' lives?
Yeah, we want to see evidence of a vibrant relationship with Jesus, right? We know that it's all about helping them be able to follow Jesus for the rest of their life. And they're going to do that in the context of a church, not the church, but a context of a church, wherever they go, wherever they move after college. And so helping them plug into a church, and they might not serve because they're already giving away a lot as a young life, but learn the importance of the local church and to serve in it. And we think the spiritual disciplines, figuring out, the sacred pathways. Not everybody is going to read scripture for an hour a day, but some people, that's not, some people really experience God in nature. So it's figuring out what sacred pathway are you wired. We have to do all of them because it wasn't like, I'm not really gifted in prayer. I'm good. I don't have to pray. But it is finding how do you experience God, and you want to lean into that one. We're going to do all of them. And so part of it is also a generosity, a kingdom mentality. A lot of it is kingdom. You know what Jesus talked about the most in the Gospels is the kingdom, 126 times. Now, I've asked that question to in fact, I was with a group of 400 college students just a couple of weeks ago, and I did a little breakout with 100 of them. I asked the question, what did Jesus talk about the most in the Gospels? No one could get it. No one got it. Very, very, I didn't get it until I was like 40. Most people say faith, love, money, sex. It's the kingdom. So what is God's kingdom? And how do we help them to see? Because if Jesus talked about it a lot, guys, I hadn't done a Bible study on the kingdom in 15 years of ministry. Like, I'm not saying we got to do it every week, but man, that should be a big part of how we're thinking because it's what Jesus talked about all the time. And so that's what we really kind of backtracked from is like, what is God's kingdom? How do we help them to implement and not compartmentalize their life, but to have Jesus speak into every aspect of their life, their job, their family, their relationships, what you do behind closed doors, who you are when no one's looking, who you are when everyone's looking, your money. And so, but really it all has to do with God's kingdom.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Pete, I've always been impressed. You all are interested in reaching the whole world, not just U.S. youth. In fact, a couple of our guys on our staff used to be country directors for you guys in Europe. So we have benefited. VIA has benefited from some of your leaders who have led some of your overseas ministries. But what is the Young Life Missions vision, and how do you spread that? What is the Young Life Missions vision overall, just very briefly? But then how do you somehow try to build that into the Young Life College ministries here? We're E, we're D, we're M, that missions mobilization piece, campus by campus. But so you've got this missions vision to reach the world, but then how does that connect to what your staff are doing on campus to try to build that vision into college students?
Shad, I would say if the one word that comes to mind that would inform our missions mobilization, it's multiplication. And you know what? I've learned so much from there's certain churches and there's certain campus ministries that aren't called Young Life that do this so well. And so we've learned a ton about it. It's who's your men, who's your women, who are your 3, who's your 1, who's your 12. These questions, when you have, so we have something called the leadership tree. It's, I think it's a tool that a lot of people use, but it's so you can track. You start with yourself, and it's so you track back your leadership tree, but then you also track who are you investing in, and then who are they investing in. And so everywhere we've gone with into the 112 countries, we want as soon as possible to have local national leadership. We want to have people in every position of leadership that aren't Americans if we're going to other countries. And so we think what that can do, that we encourage our Young Life College campus ministries to take international trips. I don't know the number that do. I need to find that out. But I would say that's been my heart from the start, as far as gotten to lead trips to Africa and one to China, but really the Middle East has been, we went every other year to Palestine and Israel, even once to Jordan. But then you start to build friendships, relationships. And if you want God to teach you something, go on a trip. He can teach you at home, of course, but you just learn so much. And so I think, but the multiplication piece of, if I were to ask a question of, the movie that comes to mind is Mr. Holland's Opus. And it's an older movie. Not a lot of people have seen it, but I would say if you want a good picture of multiplication, you watch Mr. Holland's Opus and you read a book called Dream Big by Henrietta Mears. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a cool book. And if you see pictures of her, I don't know how cool she was, but all these people that started all these incredible organizations and mission organizations came out of her Sunday school class, including Bill Bright and Jim Rayburn and all these other, I mean, Dale Bruner and Richard Halverson, all these people that like out of her little Sunday school class, because she multiplied herself into people. And so Mr. Holland's Opus is that great movie where, this music teacher, I think the budget gets cut and he is kind of forced into retirement, basically fired from the school. And he had this dream of writing this big symphony that would make him all this money, make him famous, but he's not. And he's leaving school with like literally a box from his desk. And his wife and his son lead him into the auditorium, and there they have this. The auditorium is packed full. And then the governor comes in, who was one of his former students, and she says, "You wanted to do this thing that'll make you rich and famous. You would think yourself a failure, but you're not, because we are the symphony. We are the opus." Because he had given himself to little small groups of students over the course of 40 years. And then there's this auditorium full of hundreds and even thousands of people who had their life impacted. And so that's when we think of international, we really think of missionary to the school, but multiplying is, okay, where are you going to go? And as we have these great works all over the world, we have little short-term possibilities to go and see. So I don't know that answers your question, but
No, that's inspiring, and that reminds me of what Apostle Paul said. He said, "What is our joy? What is our crown? Is it not you?" And so the people that he led to Christ, that he discipled, that's at the end of the day, we could start organizations and ministries and all that, but really, it's the people and it's those individual lives that we're going to see in that spiritual multiplication that God wants to birth. And God wants, because it's part of his plan, he wants to birth it through every ministry listening to this podcast, every ministry leader. There are people that God wants to use you to disciple and who will disciple others. And that's the kingdom, right? That's the kingdom of God going forth. And I love it, P. And let's talk about Young Life. You have this opportunity at Young Life College. Man, it's brand new. This is brand new emphasis for y'all. Man, I'd love to just, so our listeners can hear and pray for you and maybe even just partner with y'all. What's some of your vision for kind of expanding this Young Life College, and how can people be praying for that movement moving forward?
Thanks, Paul. Our vision is that not one college student would graduate from the 4,200 colleges without having heard the gospel from a trusted friend. And we want to reach hands across every divide and across every, I have told our staff when we're starting something new, if you kick in the door somewhere, we're going to, I haven't maybe said it this way, but we might kick you to the curb. I think it dishonors the university. We're going to see what else is going. That's what we did when we started. I've only started one college ministry, James Madison, but I met with all the campus ministry leaders individually and just said, "Hey, tell me about what's going on. Where are you guys thinking you're going next?" We want to go to the lost. We want to storm the gates of hell in prayer for lost students. And it sure seems like this is an age where faith flowers the best. And so there's so many lost students. So we want to see them come to faith and then deploy them. And whether that's they come to faith in Young Life and then they go lead Crew, or they come to faith in Crew and then they go lead IV, or they come to faith in FCA and they go become part of the Navigators, or just volunteer with a local church. These are all wins for us. These are all wins. And so that's our vision. I don't know if it's not super fancy, but it's that we want to be whatever it takes people, Paul. That's why I think we've become such quick friends, is that you recognize when somebody's a whatever it takes person. Like Shad, he's going to do whatever it takes to reach all those incredible presidents of fraternities and guys at Arkansas. He's going to do whatever it takes. And that's whatever it takes includes a lot of sacrifice. So we want to be those type of kingdom oriented people that show up and go into hard places and go where maybe not a lot of other people want to go, and show up and love and pour ourselves out like a drink offering and get to watch as God does the work, right? And we also need to pray. We need to pray. We want to. I think that's one thing. If we want to strategize and have vision, and we have that. We have the strategic plan. We have all that stuff. But if we're not praying and we don't see a work of God, if the Spirit doesn't work, we don't want to be a part of this. If He doesn't do something where that's why I think one of my mentors, I forget who he quotes, but he says if you're not attempting something so big that apart from God's intervention it will fail, you're missing the point. So that's, I think, all of us. I mean, from every campus movement and the Collegiate Day of Prayer, and then all these other incredible campus ministries that we've learned so much, and we hope to continue to learn from. Gosh, if we're not taking a swing at something so big that, gosh, apart from God really intervening, this fails, we're missing it, right? So really grateful for you guys helping us to kind of think that big.
Well, Pete, brother, you are the man for the job. You are God's man. And I sensed that the first time I talked to you, bro, on the phone, and then the time we've gotten to spend together, even at this retreat recently that we got to go on with other collegiate ministry leaders. And I know you're going to ask and believe God for big things, and that the Lord is going to use your vision, your passion, your conviction in the lives of myriads of current and future Young Life staff and students. I just know that, and I sense that, and I feel that, and it's addictive, isn't it? Seeing college students' lives, when you see one student lives change, you go, man, I want to see a second student. I want to see a third student. In fact, I think I want to give my life to this. Yesterday morning at 7 a.m., I had 6 of these fraternity presidents in my barn there, feeding them breakfast, and then we're getting into the Word for the very first time, and we say, turn to this particular book of the Bible, this chapter. Well, I do it really slowly, and I'm telling you, you got to go past this one and past that one, and I'm trying to be the last one to get to it, so I don't embarrass anybody, And I explained to them, now there's an Old Testament, there's a New Testament, and these little numbers are, these are verses, and so anyway, you could tell that this was the first time that they had ever opened the Bible, and it's just so refreshing. And then one of them, I kind of I knew he has a great freedom of cursing in any situation, even in Bible study, he lets it fly out of there, And you know what? I love it. It's so Young Life-ish, and to go after guys that have had no background, no exposure, and they're not coming because they like my wife's egg sausage casserole. They're not coming because I'm some great teacher or some cool guy. They're coming because the relational network is there. They know each other. They like each other. They want to be there. They're not going to miss. And I just think those are concepts that not only work, they're in the scriptures, but they work on mission settings as we go after these existing relational networks in other countries. They also work on college campuses, and they're also things that Young Life has been doing for decades that I think the collegiate body of Christ needs to really learn from and focus on. And so anyway, I want to close our time out in prayer here, brother, and we want to ask you, if you would, to pray and ask God to work in and through all the Young Life ministries, of course, but also those that are listening, those who are tuning in today, that God would use this in their life too. So would you close in prayer, and then Paul will kind of take us out for the day.
Would love it. Thanks, Shab.
Thanks, bud.
A couple months from now, maybe you ask them to turn to Hezekiah and just see if somebody will actually open it, and then just act like they're at Found Hezekiah, but it's not a book.
That's right. I forgot.
Father, thank you for Paul and Shad and their leadership, and thank you for every single person who's listening to this. podcast are watching it right now. Thank you for their heart for young people. Thank you for your heart for young people. Probably some of the disciples, maybe even most of the disciples, were college age or around there. Father, would you speak to every single one of us who is doing college ministry and encourage us, lead us, teach us. We want to draft in behind you for this. We don't want to dream it up ourselves. And I pray that anything was of this, and during this podcast, that one of you would just fall to the ground, never to be thought of again. But anything that was of you would be grabbed onto and utilized all for your glory. And Father, we know you've told us, I mean, if we change the university, we will change the world. And we know that college students are the most invitable, recruitable, trainable, sendable people ever. And Father, would you sweep many, many, many of them into your kingdom this semester, starting now, and deploy them back into their universities and around the world to reach more and more college students for you. We love you. And we thank you for this time. Pray this in the incredible name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Pete. And that was epic and inspiring. And I'm so glad our listeners get to be a part of it. It personally encouraged me just to think about, I love your vision, every student. There's no reason that we, the Church of Jesus Christ, should not be able to impact every single student with the gospel. And so, because the stakes are that high. So love it. Thanks, friends. If you are listening today, which you are, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and even sign up for weekly email resources from vsstudents.org. And also personally let Shad and I, or even Pete, we'll include his contact information as well on the show notes. Let us know how we can personally serve you guys and encourage you all. So until next time, God bless.